I haven't done a PowerPoint on this before. Do I have to share my?
Yes, but I have to make you a co-host. So hang on, whoops, hang on 2 seconds. Where'd you go? There you are. So now you can share your screen.
Okay. And I do that. Oh, I see.
Great.
Okay.
And hang on. Don, you raised your hand?
I'm trying. Can you hear me?
I can.
I just can't put my video on so I can see you guys.
So you can't see us. Then I suggest you log off, close Zoom entirely, and then re-log on.
Okay, because I'm on my phone. I'm sitting outside this morning.
Oh. Yeah,
okay, I'll try again.
Okay.
All
but
right, thank
on the
you.
phone, I'm not sure you can get us visually.
Okay, sure. All right, I'll try again.
Thanks.
All right.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's
Louis,
Louis.
for you, and you're in Houston, right?
Dallas.
Dallas.
Close.
Well, close to Houston, I guess.
I am.
100
Good
miles.
morning.
Good
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So it is 9 o'clock, a little bit after, and I know John doesn't have a ton of time. And so I wanted to take a second to just, John will of course introduce himself and tell you guys his story. But John and I have known each other a really long time at this point. I met John originally, I think you were kind of, well, you were still quite involved with Woods Hole at that point and growing oysters in Duxbury.
Right.
Right. And so John and I met through his involvement in the growing the oysters in Duxbury piece, and have kind of crossed paths a lot over the years. And now John is growing shrimp, I think, in a barn in Vermont. So I keep threatening to come visit, and then there's this silly pandemic thing happening. So, but I will be there soon enough.
All right.
I'm going to turn it over to you, John.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. I don't know how many people are here. Do you know?
Now we have 8 students out of like 35, and they'll be joining probably over the next 5 to 10 minutes. And then also they'll watch it because I'm recording it, because some students are working as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, good morning, and thanks for having me. And I put together a bunch of pictures. We don't really have good internet connection at the farm itself, so I unfortunately can't do a live broadcast. But I put a bunch of just pictures, no text. Just I'll describe what we do. I mean, that's the format, right, Jen? You want to?
Yes, that'd be great.
Go through the whole thing. Yeah, and as Jen said, I'm a marine ecologist, and I spent several years working at Battelle, Woods Hole Group, and Tetra Tech in terms of consulting, and then I started an oyster farm in Duxbury, Massachusetts, back in 2005, I think, and was part of that Island Creek group of farms for a number of years, and then did my own wholesale business and started selling oysters in Vermont, and we ended up moving up here, and I moved from the oyster business into inland aquaculture. And so what I'm going to talk about today is basically a recirculating aquaculture system, RAS, it's often called. And what I'm doing is growing marine shrimp. They're Ecuadorian white shrimp. And so it's a saltwater system, and it's a no discharge system. And it's the type of aquaculture that it is called biofloc. And biofloc is the opposite of a clear water system. It's basically retaining a lot of suspended solids in the actual water itself. And the treatment of the water, the transformations of the waste from the shrimp are done in situ, right in the water, because the nitrifying bacteria hang on to these particles of organic matter, and they process oxidize the ammonia into nitrate and also build biomass in themselves. And then the shrimp also graze on those. So it's a bit of a recycling, increases the feed conversion ratio, makes it more efficient, but it also has some drawbacks too that I can talk about. So should I go ahead and try to share the screen and show you some pictures? Are there any questions about, did I miss anything? Probably not yet.
Yeah, I kind of, people are muted because I am recording. So I'm trying to, we can wait till you're done and then, unless there's something that is burning a question,
Okay.
then.
All right, so let's see if I can do this.
Great.
That's my little logo. So this is what the shrimp look like. And this is a nice picture of these Vaname shrimp, native to mostly the west coast, Pacific coast of southern Mexico down to Ecuador in South America. And these guys, well, I'll just go through the process. So here's the barn I'm in. And this is a conversion of dairy and pig barns has been happening mostly in the Midwest and a bit further south for growing shrimp and tilapia, crawfish. And so this is a barn. Most of the barn is to the left side of this image, which is about a 1 acre size large dairy barn. And this was the calf barn part of it. And a friend of mine bought this and the 600 acres to expand his barley and basically his grain malting business. So inside there's a malting business, and also a local brewery has moved in called Foam, and they're doing some work in there, and also a bakery. This is what it looks like in the winter from the inside. So the point of me putting this in here is I have to keep these shrimp at 80 degrees. So it becomes challenging in the wintertime when we have a few feet of snow and it's 0 degrees out. So a couple of years ago, this is what the calf barn looked like. It was, I had already partially cleaned it out at this point, but just imagine this picture with about 6 to 12 inches of dried up old manure and various farm implements and things. Notice the walls are all black from fly manure from the years that had been operating. And it was in pretty bad shape. So the first thing is to, make a space. So considerable time was put into tearing the place down inside, removing concrete walls, posts, things like that. And eventually over a few months, got the place cleaned out and started building this shrimp farm. And here's my friend Jeremy. He's putting together some of the tanks. So basically what I've done is, you can see, I don't think I have a pointer here, but in the background, you see the frames. These are roughly 3,000 gallon pools, and they're insulated and lined with a pond liner. This is aquaculture pond lining material made by Firestone, I believe. And then, well, in this picture, you can see in the background, I'm also using what are called IBC totes, which are cubic meter, 1,000 liter transport plastic tubs, often used in maple syrup and alcohol, stuff like that for holding. I use those for the nursery. So in essence, what's happening is I'm getting, just like in the oyster aquaculture and other fish, I get seed shrimp, baby shrimp from a hatchery overnight shipped. And they spend the first month in those pools in the background there, which I'll show more of. And those blue barrels in between are for solid settling and for biomedia storage. So the ammonia processing happens through a closed loop system there. And then these larger pools in the foreground were fitted with heat and aeration. So the orange pipes you see there lining the edges, that's basically a hydronic system that's connected to a propane boiler in my utility room. And there's a thermostat in each pool, and basically it's controlled. It communicates between the pool and the boiler, and hot water is pumped through those orange PEX tubes and maintains the temperature of the water. The aeration is those 9-inch disc diffusers, and the air coming in is coming in from these large regenerative blowers that you'll see in various aquaculture operations. And they're on consistently. Here is a view of the nursery, and in the foreground, you might see some little tiny shrimp along the wall of that first tank. This is looking out towards the main room. Here's what the little guys look like when they come from the hatchery. I spend about 2 or 3 hours, maybe 4 hours, acclimating them to the farm water. So they come in at full strength seawater, and they're chilled down to like 16 to 18 degrees C. And I have to bring them up to about 25 to 28 degrees centigrade, and a different salinity and different water chemistry. So it takes several hours. So there's a bit of moving water back and forth in these buckets, and then they're finally ready to go in. And they, that's what they look like again. I think it's a little noisy. So they'll spend about a month in that nursery, and then they'll go into this biofloc pool. And here's a picture of the aeration running and what the water typically looks like. I think one of these is a video too. So I have 10 of those pools, and the shrimp will stay in these pools for about 2 to 3 months, depending on the demand. Some restaurants might want small shrimp, so they'll spend a month and a half or so growing. If I have the ability, if I don't sell out, I'll have larger shrimp available if they spend 2 to 3 months in these. They're fed 4 times a day. They're fed with, right now, a commercial feed from Pennsylvania called Ziegler, who are one of the top 2 or 3 aquaculture feed companies in the country. The feed is primarily soy and barley grain with fish meal, and then micronutrients and also some vitamins and some probiotic as well. And I also make probiotic out of bacillus and lactobacillus species of bacteria. I do that to enhance the immunity of the shrimp against pathogenic bacteria such as Vibrio, which can be a problem in these systems. And what I do is I ferment rice bran with lactobacillus, and I get my lactobacillus bacteria from my friends at Foam Brewery. They use it to make sour beers, and they often bring me packages of that. So let's see. So one of the critical things, the most critical thing in inland fish and this type of biofloc farming is maintaining water quality. And once these pools, just like an aquarium, cycle up over a couple of months, the bacteria, the microbial community there is what gets established, and any uneaten feed or the waste from the shrimp get broken down and oxidized into nitrate, and which is non-toxic at low concentrations. And also what we have to do is keep the oxygen, the metabolism in these pools from getting too loaded with organic carbon. So what you see in this slide is called an Imhoff cone, which measures settlable solids. There's an optimal level between about 10 and 15 that maintains this microbial community and keeps it safe from any big changes in dissolved oxygen from too much bacteria and organic matter. So this is, in addition to doing routine water quality testing like nitrogen and pH and salinity and some other things, measuring the solids on a regular basis is one of the most critical things to do. When the solids do, they will eventually creep up and get up to the 20, 30. And when that happens, I employ these things. This blue barrel here that you see is a solid settler. It's one version of what people use to settle the solids out. So it's a filter. It's basically just a gravity filter. The water gets slowed down inside that thing with some bird netting. And that'll run for typically, once a week for about 3 or 4 hours until the solids come down, and then that water gets recycled. All right, I think I got a video here. pretty exciting video. That was the clean water coming out of the pipe. This is the existing wastewater treatment facility I have there. So that water that and sludge that I'm taking out, or any wastewater that I have, if I drain a tank down and there's extra sludge or extra water that I want to run through the treatment, it'll start by going to the back of that left side where that last red top is. And that's the first couple of those pools are anoxic. So I do anoxic and then, or anaerobic and then aerobic digestion. And it finally comes into the foreground to these guys that are open, aerated, and I put biomedia in there to polish it off and to make it clean. And it's disinfected with bleach. I just got a UV sterilizer that I'll start applying to this, and then all that water goes back into the system, and that's all just pure salt water. And occasionally I have to add calcium and magnesium and potassium as those get exported with the shrimp. Here's some sludge that gets dewatered, and that will eventually go into compost. That's a very rich organic matter. Here's a little video. So that's shrimp poop, basically. And it's great fertilizer. So the shrimp grow for, like I said, a couple months, 2 or 3 months. And when they're market size, I'll drain a pool down and get them all out. They go right into an ice slurry, some ice water that basically kills them right away, euthanizes them right away. And then they'll be processed. So this is just a picture of some shrimp that came out of a pool, and they'll get sorted and weighed and bagged up. And they'll go out either to direct retail. People can order them online and pick them up, or they'll go to restaurants. So the COVID situation has changed the business quite a bit. It was primarily restaurant sales last year, and then the restaurant stopped, and I had to go out and sell these at the doorstep. So that went pretty well for some time, and that's still ongoing right now, and the restaurants are starting to open back up. I think that's all the slides I have. So yeah.
That was actually terrific. I think it's always really nice because, this class is taught asynchronously online through PowerPoint and interactive kind of slides, but to see what we're studying in practice, to see the RAS system and to hear your story is really helpful for people to kind of understand the transition from, of course, from the academic classroom to the real world.
Right.
So you guys, I think you should just show your face and ask questions. I think that would be a really nice way to ask John whatever questions you may or may not have. And I'm sure
have questions.
Okay.
One, your company looks really cool. And one day when I come up to Vermont and stop in Shelburne or Burlington, I will stop by to come look. But I was kind of curious. I mean, you say a lot of really interesting things, especially like, for example, when it comes to feeding, right? And I'm sure this is not local to just shrimp, but like when you think about very popular, especially in stores, you always hear the whole notion of wild caught salmon versus farm raised salmon. And lots of people see so many different benefits between the two. And I personally, for myself, always go for wild caught, and I always look at farm raised, and I see so many issues. But I think, at least in 2020, I'm trying to see things a little differently, how something that is farm raised can be just as good, if not better, than something wild caught. So when you do things and you say things like, their feed is comprised of like corn, barley, soy, and things, do you have people or do you have competitors? I mean, like you said, you have a very specific green shrimp that's from like the South America type side, but do you have people ever ask you like, why do you choose these ways of feeding? Is it just because it's purely cost efficient? Is it because you think those things that feed it are giving the greatest nutritional value for what your ultimate product is? I'm just super curious to learn.
Yeah, well, the feed is the most important input, of course. The So the feed, yeah, I don't believe there's corn in this feed, but it's formulated specifically for shrimp, and these shrimp are just to go back a tiny bit. The Pacific white leg shrimp have been bred, hybridized over the years to be disease resistant. They're fast growing, so that's why that species has grown, and they're very common. They used to be tiger shrimp were the most popular in farm, whether they're big open mangrove farms or indoor. Now it's mostly this anime shrimp because of they're more efficient. Now the feed, one thing about the feed is I'm working toward trying to get an organic, locally based feed going. So I'm in this malt house. So we have a mill, and we have access to a lot of grain. It's the fish meal replacement that I'm studying right now in terms of how to avoid buying fish oil or fish meal, which is menhaden or mackerel or bycatch, and using fermented, bacterially produced fatty acids, DHA, which are essential fatty acids that these shrimp need to grow. So we're working on that now. I know Jen put down that it's an organic farm, and that is part of the plan. That's what we're looking at in terms of getting a feed mill put in. The feed is basically it's a percentage of body weight over. So if I know the biomass in each pool, it's typically between 4 and 6% of the body weight that is fed, and they're continuous feeders. So ideally, they'd like to be fed every couple of hours because it takes them a couple of hours to once the food goes through the mouth. They don't have a stomach; it's just one digestive tract, and it has a residence time of about 2 hours on average. So I feed them about every 3 or 4 hours, about 3 or 4 times a day by hand.
Thank you.
And I don't know, did that answer your question?
That's a lot of good information. I didn't realize that, there's so many differences obviously between like non-organic and organic, and there's so many constant debates, but it's really interesting that, finding replacements, like you said, for this essential fatty acids, those DHAs. I mean, it doesn't seem like an easy task necessarily.
No, it's not. And there's a lot of research, a lot of work going into different oils, like camelina oil, for example, it's called false flax. That's being discovered as a way to replace fish meal, at least 90% anyway. And the question of wild versus farmed, the majority of the shrimp that you'll see in the markets are coming from overseas, and a lot of those farms are questionable in terms of their hygiene and the water quality that they're coming from. There are some, I'd say, safe farms in the U.S. along the Gulf Coast, and even in Ecuador and Central America, South America, but you don't know. And the majority of the farms that you get, so this inland farm is producing extremely fresh shrimp to the immediate local system, mostly the greater Burlington area. That's harvested and sold the same day, and so we don't have to ship it across the world or to get it to the consumer.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I was wondering, well, how come you chose those tanks? Because we're learning about circular tanks right now and raceway tanks. Are those because those are cleaner than that sort of tanks, the ones you have?
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot, so it's a lot of information. So I was just wondering, like, what makes you want to choose Vermont in that area, and also those particular tanks? Because I know the raceway tanks are supposed to be more flowing with water. They clean more. So I didn't know. I just curious.
Yeah.
Are they less expensive, what you have?
Yeah. So I'm in Vermont because this is where we wanted to be. It wasn't the ideal place to grow shrimp, but
Okay.
but so I spent some time a couple of years before I really started to build this thing. I went to Kentucky State University, where they have a very good program on various species of inland aquaculture, including shrimp. And they had these pools, basically the same dimensions as the one I built, same idea, and it worked really well. So I've talked to other scientists, other farmers doing it. The people have moved away from circular to D-shaped tanks, or basically rectangular, but if you can manage to have a softer curve, like a curve on the ends, and to have a central divider and have the water flowing in circulating around, that's optimal. I haven't actually done the center walls yet, and I haven't had the water directed yet. The reason I did this is, the circular tanks, if you go to like Pentair and buy a big fiberglass tank, it's extremely expensive and bulky. You can get Walmart type of swimming pool tanks, which are not that expensive, but they tend to have a short lifespan. They either rust out, the supports rust, or the liner material may be toxic and doesn't last that long. So with this,
Go
yeah.
ahead. I was gonna ask you another question. I have a yard here. You probably can't see my yard, but anyways, I was wondering like if I could start something in my yard, but I have to have a permit, right? And then do I have to have it closed in like a barn or a setting? Because it'd be cool to have like a tank in my yard and then maybe sell something that I'd like to, get into doing. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Also,
Are you
John's in Gloucester, just so you
in
know.
Massachusetts? Yeah. I don't think you need a permit to grow. You'd have to probably get a permit to import the shrimp or fish, whatever you want to grow, from out of state. So you need a hatchery, basically a propagation or a hatchery permit to buy the small animals. And then as far as, I don't need, it's different from shellfish, Jen. There's no permit requirements for selling. I'm not processing, I'm selling head-on shrimp. If I were to be taking the head off and taking the shells off, then I would need a HACCP plan and a separate room and a cold room and all that stuff. So this is I just have 2 very minor permits for importing the shrimp to Vermont.
So I have a question for you, John, and it's scalability. So, right, you're in this kind of confined space, and I'm assuming your business is going to grow, hoping, right? And so what is your plan to scale that business in a way that's sustainable for you to manage and, and also best kind of quality of product?
Yeah, so right now it's about just under 4,000 square feet, and I have a nursery, wastewater, and 10 grow out pools. And that's the capacity of this room. Just so you have an idea of the scale, each one of those pools can take about 4,000 animals per cycle. So you don't go, the greater the densities and the more biomass you have towards the end of the growing period, the higher likelihood there is of disease and imbalance.
The lower biomass?
The higher the biomass. So you target, you put them in and you target the final biomass, and then you base your density based on that, based on what you feel the mortality is going to be too. Typically, once these are established, you get about 80% survival to market from in those pools. So that's, and with 10 pools, I initially was going to have 12 or 14, and I ran out of space. I just needed more space to do other things. And at that scale, you can have a weekly drawdown in sales. There's space inside the larger barn that's available to expand into. And I've thought about maybe some high tunnels, greenhouses out. There's a lot of land around, 600 acres, so we can put a greenhouse out. And along those lines, I've looked into also growing trout and catfish, which are cooler water species. But scalability, yeah. So this is, I'm at a certain scale. If I were to jump it up, it'd be a bit more of an investment and more work, but more income. So yeah, there's a minimum size, and then kind of a first, critical mass which is basically where I am right now.
And how many shrimp are you producing a week? Or can you
So,
produce?
yeah, and it's hard to answer that question because it changes all the time. The demand, either selling out completely 1 or 2 pools when the restaurants are in high demand, and there may be some slow weeks. So if you figure on average, if 3,000 animals are ready to go every week, at say they're 15, it's roughly 70 to 140 pounds can be sustainably done if nothing goes wrong. There's no more.
Other folks have questions for John? You can raise your hand, but I mean, like your virtual hand, of course, down below, or you can also just show your face and raise your hand. No, no one?
I have more questions.
Oh, fine, Audrey. We've got a while.
So obviously you said that some restaurants prefer having a younger shrimp, depending on things. What, for this specific type of shrimp that you're growing, what is their average lifespan if they were not to be killed immediately or harvested immediately?
So in the wild, or just like if I just
No, I guess both.
Yeah, so they'll reach their maximum size in about 6 months. They become sexually mature in about 6 to 8 months, and then they grow to about. If I see them up to, I've kept some in some pools to try to breed at some point. Like 60 to 80 grams, which is a quarter of a pound or less, just under that. I believe the lifespan, if you kept them going in an aquarium, is up to 2 years.
Cool.
So when they reach sexual maturity, they may have offspring about 4 or 5 times in their life, I believe.
Do you think theoretically, like if you, this is not a real situation, but if your demand went down for a long time due to more COVID, more crazy things, and people just don't want shrimp as much, do you think shrimp that you've had for longer that, they're reaching sexual maturity faster, they're a little bit heavier, are they still the same quality? Like would be eating like a 3-year-old shrimp, which probably wouldn't happen in your place, would it taste the same? Would it have that same? Okay.
Yeah, they're all the same. The only difference is when they're very small, they're molting very frequently, and you tend to have a large proportion of them being kind of like a soft shell. And when they're small, they just typically have a smaller shell. So they can be like dipped in. They can either be sautéed in butter with some spices and eaten whole. You kind of crush the heads and get it all the juices going. A lot of the flavors in the head in that area. A lot of the lipids, and a lot of chefs are doing fried. So they'll dredge them in a little cornstarch, put them in the fryolator for a minute, and then have a hot spicy thing to dip them in, and people eat them whole, the head and all.
I don't love seafood. It's funny. I'm from Baltimore, and so everyone's like, "You love blue crab," and I can't stand blue crab. And then my partner's from Barnstable, and so we did a ton of crabbing this year, and I cooked it all, and I made soft shell crab cakes and everything. And my boyfriend's like, how do you not love this? I'm like, I just don't, but it's beautiful and it's so versatile. And I love that, especially with your shrimp. If you want them younger, you said they're molting more frequently, they can be smaller. You can just eat them with their exoskeletons or whatever. It seems really useful, different applications.
Yeah. And if there's a bottleneck in sales, like when COVID hit, sales basically stopped for several weeks. They can be frozen as well. So I've started quick freezing shrimp because you want to keep them moving along. You can hold them in the nursery for a couple months and cool them down and lower the feeding rate. And what's interesting about them is they have compensatory growth cycles. So if you hold them down and retard their growth when they're young for up to about 2 months, you can put them into, you can start warming the water up, feeding them more, and they'll catch up to their linear growth rate that they should have been at very fast. They actually grow faster when they're held back because they're on a time schedule. So given that and the limited resources of space, if I've got mature ready shrimp, sometimes I'll just harvest them anyway and freeze them.
Cool.
So
I have another thing to say. This summer, I live in a small apartment, but this summer I ordered crawfish from Louisiana, and they sent me in perishables. So I got like 30 pounds, and I built up 30 pounds of crawfish this summer. It was really
yeah,
cool to see them. It was so neat to see them in the you know the was it the ice the hot ice,
yep,
cold ice, and then taking them out and watering them and putting them it was really neat. I really enjoyed it.
yeah. My
I never
niece
thought
did
I could do something like that. I was ambitious this summer. It was
Cool.
really nice. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, does anyone else have some questions? I know, like Louis, don't you have some questions about, well, not necessarily about shrimp, but you have a big idea about what you're thinking of doing in the aquaculture space, don't you? You're muted, so if in case you're going to answer me.
Unmute. Sorry.
There you are.
I was talking, I was muted. My question I would like to ask is, you talked about the formula that you, in a sense, use for the shrimp food. How far are you away from becoming totally organic? And what would you have to change in your formula to make it totally organic? That's my
Yeah.
first question.
So, well, yeah. So I don't. There's a bit of variability in how you want to make feed. You could it has to be nutritious, of course, and be palatable to the shrimp. So just making vegetable oil or fermented proteins and mix that in with grain might have the nutritional profile that would be adequate, but the shrimp may not want it. So I'm probably a year away from coming up with my own feed. It's also, I haven't really determined how expensive it's going to be to do, depending on what method I pursue. So if it costs a lot more than just getting it shipped up from Pennsylvania or from other potentially organic producers, that might be something to do. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. What version? Say, for example, you need to get to version X on your organic formula. What version are you at the moment to get there? You think? You said I know you said in about another year.
Oh,
But as far as you mentioned soy, barley, fish meal, some nutrients, vitamins, and some probiotics. You said that you do the probiotic locally, I think.
yeah, I've made I fermented probiotic from some of the basically the byproducts from the malting process. So I've used organic rye and barley to make some probiotic fermented probiotic concoctions. I've also used just off-the-shelf rice bran. Rice bran is the easiest to work with. It's just the right consistency, and the bacteria really like to grow in it. It only takes about 18 hours to make a 5-gallon batch of really great probiotic mix. So where am I in the timeline? It's very early. It's on a spreadsheet. I'm still looking at, like, I have almost an endless access to malted barley, and malted barley in the feed world has been more in the news about being used for aquaculture feeds. It's getting the fish meal, fish oil, or the replacements for that in line is really going to be the challenge for it to be economically reasonable.
Have you looked into other forms of like maybe BSF, the black soldier fly?
I have, yeah. I've done a lot of reading on that.
What do you think?
I think that would be great. Yeah, crickets, black soldier fly. There are a couple other insects that have been that I've been reading about as well. I don't know. I go back and forth from looking at just oils as a fish meal replacement to other, like some insects like that. Have you done much with black soldier fly?
I'm studying it as an alternative.
Yeah, and there's a mealworm. Mealworm is another one that's fairly popular. The black beetle.
John, I have a question about the probiotic strains that you use. Are those proven, the ones you chose, to be the most effective, or are there kind of other strains that you potentially consider or looked into?
Yeah, there are a lot of strains.
Right.
I just had more access to lactobacillus, was readily available. I have also access to to bacillus species, 4 or 5 that are formulated. A friend of mine produces for his trout farm, and I've used those. They're different. It's recommended that you apply different combinations of them because the Vibrio may not react, or the shrimp may not react. The probiotics increase the immune response to the shrimp. They don't have a memory in their immune system, so they have to be stimulated. The probiotics will replace areas, space in the gut where Vibrio would like to adhere when it forms film. And it also interrupts quorum sensing in the Vibrio. So those enzymes that these bacteria, these beneficial bacteria produce, can basically turn off the virulence of the Vibrio bacteria or prevent it. So having multiple species is, from what I've been reading, the best approach, having some diversity.
Right. And so you're not sure of the strains, but you're just sure of diversity matters.
Yeah. So I'm working with about 5 different species of bacteria.
Cool.
Typically. Yeah. And there are probably about 25 more that I could, it's just finding it is challenging sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
One thing I did mention, I'm working with a couple of microbiologists from who went to Salem State. You may know these guys, Prospective Research, Dakota Hamill. Do you know Dakota?
Mm.
They're in Beverly. They have a lab, and they've produced a probiotic that a certain strain that really works effectively against Vibrio in their laboratory trials. So we're doing farm scale trials here right now. Actually, we're starting to build the pools, and we'll be doing weekly, agar plates and counts of and counting the Vibrio and seeing their application rates, how it works at my scale.
What's the name of the company again?
Prospective Research, I believe,
Okay.
out of Beverly.
Great.
It's Dakota Hamill and Jake Cotter.
Okay.
It's their patented probiotic strain that they're producing.
Okay. Great. Does anyone else have any other questions? Oh, Audrey's raising her hand.
I have more since no one's asking things.
Yeah.
When it comes to when we think of farming, right? When we think of traditional cattle farming and everything, people always joke what are our days off? And people say, we're farmers, we don't have days off. So when it comes to an aquaculture production farm such as this, that when you're focusing on one species, I mean, I know that you said that they have to be fed multiple times a day. Do you, in terms of people who want to research this as a future career, I mean, what does your work-life balance look like? I mean, you said that you're on the smaller scale right now, but if you have, room to grow or hire more people, would you have, more time, or is it something where you really have to be committed to you being there every single day, regardless of holidays? Just what's it like?
Yeah. So good question. Right now I'm solo. I had an employee last fall and winter until basically until COVID started, and he went back to Massachusetts. Having one other person around that certainly provides a couple of days off a week, but right now I'm basically, it's about 5 miles away, so I'll run down in the first thing in the morning and take care of some feeding, measure things out. On light days, it's just getting them fed 3 or 4 times a week, and it's not too difficult to get someone to come in and just do that. Some friends of mine who have farms in other parts of the country have automatic feeders. There are pros and cons to that. Sometimes they jam up. Sometimes they don't work. They're expensive, and I think it's good to have someone in with their eyes on the farm daily and not try to get away too much. But I'm putting a lot of time to it right now, early on. On days when I'm pumping water around or harvesting, those are longer days where it's basically there all day. But and early on when I was just learning the ropes there, but still building it, there were a few 2 a.m., 3 a.m. nights, and we're sleeping over there. But yeah, they take daily attention. Required.
Louis, I got another question. Concerning the bioflux solution and in relation to the water quality, could you tell us a little bit more about the bioflux and how often do you have to add or replace water to the tanks? And I noticed the tank looks kind of the color of the water. Is there any particular reason why it's that color?
Yeah, so the biofloc is, when I started out, these guys were going into clear water, and the nitrifying bacteria weren't established yet. So it took a couple of cycles, or at least a few months, to get the biofloc working. And what it is, it's a combination of their waste, their solid waste, and uneaten feed, or any other particulate matter that gets in, uneaten molts, the shell. They typically eat their molts, but there are always little pieces of things, and they get broken down. So after a month or two, that water turns a darker, richer brown, and then it's a matter of, once the microbes establish, they come in naturally through the air, through the hatchery water from all sources, the nitrifying bacteria. It just they divide quite slowly, so it takes several months, and then once they're established, it's a matter of making sure that the solids don't increase beyond a certain level, which will stress out the whole system. So the water exchanges is also an important thing. These systems are no discharge. I conserve all the salt for a number of reasons, but it's good to try to replace 20% of the water volume every couple of weeks, if not more. Doing too much water replacement might throw off the biofloc system. You need to keep those microbes in there. So that's the balance, is keeping that water the bacterial community really happy, and everything else will go fine, pretty much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other question, folks? I know I'm coming to the end of John's time. No? Great. Well, thank you so much, John. I'm really grateful and that you gave us some time. And oh, Louis, do you have a question?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
In relation to salt,
yeah,
how do you control the salinity of the water?
Yeah, good. I skipped over that. These shrimp can be grown in salinities down to approaching 5 parts per thousand. I grow them up around 20 to 25, kind of estuarine salinities, primarily because they tend to be able to, they're less stressed by ammonia and nitrite at higher salinities. And growing lower salinity is, it's just I think that the shrimp are more rigorous at higher salinity. So once I got all this, basically instant ocean or reef salt in there, I don't really lose very much. There's not much exported with the shrimp or the any kind of waste. So I just keep adding more if it falls down low. Evaporation I just replace with either the recycled water or from a hose from our well. But I try to maintain around 20 to 25.
Do you have any situation where you have a buildup of salt?
No, I haven't experienced any buildup at all. If there's evaporation occurring, I'll just replace it with fresh water if it's getting too salty. Yep, just dilute it down. What else? pH. Oh yeah, so nitrification consumes alkalinity. So there's a regular addition of sodium bicarbonate that I put in, and that helps keep the nitrifiers happy and maintains pH levels at around 8 or so. Nitrate can accumulate over about a year. And so nitrate, the shrimp are tolerant up to about 300 parts per million of nitrate, and that could take between 6 and 12 months to build up. The water that I put through the anaerobic and aerobic process denitrifies the majority of that. So losing nitrate through denitrification through that process. So I have basically a natural, through the wastewater cycling, a denitrification process happening. So I haven't had any nitrate issues. That's key in these saltwater systems, is to be able to get the nitrate out at some point.
Thank you very much.
Yep.
Great, John. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, pleasure. You're welcome.
I'm sure if anyone has questions, they could probably email you.
Sure, of course.
And
Yeah.
do you want to put your email in the chat? Or I guess I could send it to everyone, or you could do it.
The easiest one is vermontshrimp@gmail.com.
There you go. Who would have thought Vermont shrimp, right?
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks again. I hope you have a great day. It's certainly beautiful out. And thank you guys for coming. And oh, wait, Amanda said, oh, thank you. Okay, great.
Thank you.
All right, guys.
All right.
In 2 weeks for a lecture on seaweed from the folks at Springtide Seaweed in Gouldsboro, Maine.
Sounds good. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.